Hello, and thank you for listening. We're Suzanne Henwood and Liz Peel-Yates, and this is our podcast, Real Wisdom. Real Wisdom is a podcast series exploring the complexity, depth, and reality of using mBit coaching to thrive in the real world.
We're not offering medical, legal, or financial advice, but we are having real, deep, uplifting conversations with amazing people who have persevered through adversity or challenge and who still keep smiling. If you want to know more about how mBit is changing the world one life at a time, listen in. Thank you. Hi, everybody. We are back, and tonight it's Suzanne's turn in the hot seat. So last time I shared some of my story about how I have used mBraining to do mBeing, how it's helped me thrive and come through challenging situations. And this week we're going to hear a little bit from Suzanne about how you use mBit, how you use mBraining, and how you've incorporated it into your life. So it's Peel-Yates and Suzanne Henwood, and we're bringing you real wisdom. So Suzanne.
Yeah.
What would you like to share with us tonight?
Well, mBeing. It sounds almost kind of evangelical, doesn't it? And it's really hard to be enthusiastic without feeling like you're trying to convert everyone to something. But, and it is a deliberate but, it has radically changed the way I do my life in virtually every aspect of it. So I was, I say accused of, described as a head on legs when I first did my first coach set, and I was actually quite offended. I remember defending myself, kind of going, well, I'm quite an effective head on legs, actually, if you look at my CV. And I think I hadn't even realized how much I was living life from my head space. So for me, it's been a massive opening up of heart and gut, and living my life differently on a really physiological, ontological level. So it's really hard to say that without sounding, a bit evangelical.
And I would describe myself as a head on a stick previously. But how does that what's the difference? How does somebody who's a head on a stick know they're a head on a stick?
I don't think they do. I really don't think they do. When they're only a head on sticks, and when I was a head on stick, I really wasn't aware. And it wasn't that I was totally out of my body all the time, because at home I would have more heart base, and I certainly had gut function. I was someone that got some things done. I took action. So none of this is absolutes, right? But in terms of preference, I was very much a preference for head on legs, for understanding, for analyzing, for making meaning. And when you live in that space, you create the story that says that's okay. That's normal. That's what everyone does. You assume everyone's doing the same as you. And so, I genuinely don't think I was aware before just how much of a preference my head was in terms of making decisions, living my life, running my life really in a way. I was in academia, of course, at that time, and so I was very much living my work life in a very head-based environment. So in order to fit in to some extent and to socialize appropriately, you do play that game even more so. So it kind of felt all right living like that back then. I wasn't, particularly unhappy. I didn't go looking for ways of opening heart and gut up. In fact, as a typical head on sticks, I went on the course to find out more and understand what mBraining was about, which is a very head-based aim for the course.
So what's changed?
What changed? There was a moment everything changed for me. Many people listening might be aware of NLP and the NLP communication model. And while Grant was doing what we call an open frame in the course, so he was answering a question of somebody else's, I can't even remember what he was answering it about, the topic. But as he was answering, I kind of had him up on the platform and then this picture in my head of the NLP communication model. So from the side, everything happening out here, coming in, filter, delete, distort, generalize, etc., come up with my internal reality, my state, my physiology. But suddenly there was this massive wealth of material and information coming up from my body to join all of that in the head. So the vagus nerve, 80% upwards, who I am, identity level in the gut, how I feel, what I value, all of that stuff is also coming up into that central head part of the model to be filtered, deleted, distorted, and generalized.
Yep.
And it was like I'd spent years developing myself and doing personal development, and I had got to the point where I was kind of all right with myself. You know, I'd done lots and lots of work, but in that moment there was this realization that that story that I now had about who I was being deleted, distorted, and generalized and filtered. So who the heck was I?
Yeah.
And it was like this massive wobble, and Grant saw something going on and looked over and kind of went, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, give me a minute." Because I literally didn't know what it meant or what the implications were. It was like all of that security of knowing who you are got blown out of the water in a moment. And it took me maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And I realized that actually, however much development I'd done and however positive the story was, it was a story and thereby a boundary that then limited to who I could be.
Yeah.
So it was like this massive wall got kind of dynamited away. And I went, I can be anyone I want to be. Not losing everything I already was, but being able to grow. And so it was like this massive moment of opportunity and growth for me. And in the same course, asked Grant what his vision was for mBraining. And I remember him, he was over on my left, he was leaning up against a wall. And I kind of said, so what's this really all about? Because it's not a 4-day coach cert, is it? What's behind all this? Why would you give up your lucrative business to do this? And he said, now that I know that the brains are plastic, that we have neuroplasticity, I want to change the brain of every human on the planet to be more wise and compassionate. And I just went, who is this guy? Who has a vision that big that surely no one could not want to be involved in? And so kind of those 2 moments, one, that acceptance that I could be so much more than I already was. And I had I kind of pretty much had my dream job. I was an associate professor in health. It was a kind of, tip of my career. I'd worked so hard to get there. And then suddenly I'm like going, hang on, there's a whole nother mountain I haven't seen yet. And then kind of hearing Grant's vision and making the choice that I had to be part of that there was no way, now that I knew that I couldn't be part of that vision of his. And so, yeah, for me, that was the moment of which, those 2 moments really, where everything changed for me. And I started using mBraining in everything. Like, once you know it, you can't not know it. You can't not feel differently. You can't not make decisions differently. I still have that preference. My preference and my comfort zone is still head-based.
And how do you learn to challenge that and develop that more?
Oh, it's a learning process. I'm still on that. So we all have human patterning systems within us. And so our backgrounds, our values, our culture, our upbringing affects how we are each and every day. But knowing that it's not a closed box, knowing that I can work with that and choose to grow and adapt and change. Yeah, I'm on a learning journey. about myself constantly. I work with coaches, I work with the supervisor, I'm in a peer supervision group, and I have a spiritual director. So I'm in constant evolving, emerging processing of me.
And that commitment, that choice that you've made to, because for a lot of people, that's not everybody's choosing to have that, the supervision, the peer coaching, the you know, making sure that you're not stuck in your story. How does that make sure that you, well, no, not, you've answered that.
It doesn't make it easy, because you still end up with life happening around you, and you still end up with people that you don't align with, or, you know, tell you to fuck off, or whatever it is that, not that that's happened to me recently, she says, let that one go. That still happens.
Yeah.
Just because I'm working on myself and trying to understand myself, you still come across humanity not at its best. And I wish I could sit here and say I had the answer, that I could always transcend that, always go back to that beautiful, compassionate place, always go back to that place where I recognize they must be hurting and they have a need not being met. But I still hurt. I still get hurt. I still don't understand why someone would do something the way that they do. That still happens. So in that respect, it hasn't changed. It's not like a magic bullet that changes life.
Yeah.
But it does give you more tools to process things through. I think I stay in an unresourceful place for much less of the time.
Yeah.
And I have a brilliant group of people who I can go to and say, can you just help me work this through, and have some coaching to kind of allow my inner wisdom, true to me, right with my values, to then make a decision I'm happy with. That probably sometimes still isn't what other people would have deemed I should have done. And that's okay. This is my journey.
And I guess that's one of the things that the mBit gives us, isn't it? That mBraining gives us, is the ability to access that inner alignment. So instead of making pros and cons choices and rights and wrongs in that very head-based, what should I do? You're more free from that. You're able to really go in and say, what do I truly, deeply, really think, feel, want?
Yeah, and for me, I have a Christian faith, and so for me, it's not only an alignment within myself, it's the alignment to my God and to my faith, which I now have a beautiful model to do that. You know, as kids in Sunday school, you're kind of expected to pray. You're not really taught how to pray. You're expected to talk to God, but you're not taught how to. Where is that connection? Where do you find him? And so for me, I've used mBraining, not that mBraining itself is a tool for spirituality or faith, but I've used it to hugely grow my own faith as well. That I make sure that I'm aligned with what God wants of me. So it's not really me that is driving it. I have to make the choice. I have to respond. But yeah, tuning into that wider alignment as well has been a really important part of my journey.
And for anybody who's not mBit trained, how do you do that?
How do I do that? I think it's so simple. It's kind of almost like, yeah, why don't we just all do this automatically? So quietness first, finding space and quietness, and just stopping the world rushing around you for a while. So I will often use breathing as my core go-to place to get the, balanced breathing, but I'll also use forms of mindfulness to help me come into the present moment. So some combination of mindfulness, balanced breathing, to get me to that point of stillness so that I can connect within. And then just using beautiful, gentle questions that literally ask my head, heart, and gut, each their own questions, because they have different functions. So heart, what is truly important to you here? get out of that head story that could be saying all sorts, and does, and that's its job. I don't want to dismiss it, that's its job. But yeah, dropping into the heart, what's truly important here? Who else really matters here? What am I feeling? And we're, as humans, we're pretty poor at feeling, actually. There's something like 3,500 feelings, and most people use like 14 in a day or something crazy. So yeah, just really getting in touch with that and allowing it to be whatever it is. So if you have just had somebody rant at you, it's perfectly okay to say, actually, I felt hurt, or I feel hurt, and allow yourself to feel that and for it to pass through that kind of processing. Yeah, so quietness, balance, beautiful guided questions that are specific to each of the brains. And then, while still in balance breathing, trusting that wisdom as it emerges, that just feels right as the way forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's another, learning to trust what your body is telling you, and actually following through with that rather than resisting those urges, or allowing your head brain to pop back in and tell you different is something else we need to cultivate, right? It's something that also needs practice.
Absolutely. And especially if as a kid you were given any messages that, you know, you had to only listen to authority. Actually, you couldn't trust yourself. So yeah, learning to trust yourself is absolutely huge. And that does take a little bit of quietening down of that head voice that is there to keep generating the same story over and over, to keep you in sameness. That's kind of the ego's job.
So lately with some of the things that have been going on with your health, how has mBraining helped you with that?
Yeah, so enormously. There's kind of several components to that, really. So for those who aren't, you know, aware, what am I talking about? I had felt unwell for a while, and then ended up in a training room, having severe chest pain, and had moments of not being able to get my words together and very out of breath. So quite a few kind of signs and symptoms going on. And I was in the fortunate position that I had another MBIT trainer with me, who I kind of asked him to call an ambulance, and we sat together waiting for that ambulance to come. Now, I used all my mBraining skills to keep my self in as much of a balance as I could while I was in quite severe pain. And obviously there was some fearing going on within me as to what this meant and whether or not I was going to survive it. And I kind of did that relatively well, I think. So while the beautiful Clive Tier was on the phone to the ambulance, and they wouldn't let him go until the crew actually arrived, and initially he was obviously in a little bit of surprise and shock and trying to look after me. And I remember saying to him, Clive, it's going to be okay. And I was reassuring him. So, you know, that's the power of this, when you can just settle your system. And of course, me giving him that message was me giving it to me as well. So I was flooding my own system with it would be okay. So in that acute moment, I believe it absolutely made the whole event a lot less traumatic than it might have been. I spent a week in hospital, and when I first came out, I was still quite unwell and quite fearful of it happening again. So I used my mBraining enormously to help me overcome the fear of literally leaving the house. So again, really, really useful. And now I'm 3 months on, and I'm using it to get back to health, creating motivation to get fit again, basically. So walking regularly, but you can set a goal to walk regularly. That doesn't mean you're going to get out of bed and do it, unless you've got that beautiful alignment with the why, the values, and the gut, and the head of the how. You're not going to get out of bed on a a morning where you're feeling a bit tired. So again, mBraining has been absolutely key to actually making me do that. And I'm now walking an hour and a half, 3 times a week, feeling so much better in myself. But it's not like a magic bullet. I just press the bullet and it's there. I have to do it over and over and over again. So it's persistent, disciplined action behind the knowing the how of the M bit.
And I think that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast, was because it feels like there's so much out there talking about that, you know, we can click our fingers and suddenly everything's going to be perfect and you'll be bright and shiny and happy all the time, and if you do this, this and this, there will be no more problems. And it's just not true. You are still humaning every day, encountering, like you were saying, all of the issues, all of the emotions, the feelings, the experiences, the outside world. But what we have is this beautiful set of tools that really support us in doing that in a beautifully wise, compassionate, creative, courageous way.
Yeah, beautifully said. I mean, there's part of me that thinks it's problematic that anyone would put out there that you only have to be happy.
Yes.
That's not real life. And if what we're doing is cutting off all of those more challenging emotions, we're not living life fully.
No.
So it's about how can we live life fully and say that, you know, we do anger, we do hurt, we do upset, whatever it is that is your challenging, less resourceful emotion, but just not stay there and live there and wallow there for too long.
Yeah.
Learning how to come out of it, not always easily. It does take effort and intention and awareness in the first place. If you haven't got the awareness that that's where you are, then you're not going to take any action anyway.
But learning not to resist, learning not to be afraid, learning to surrender almost to those emotions, to know that they're all beautiful learnings, to have faith that you will come through them, that you don't have to be happy all of the time, and that it is that light and shadow, that balance that's what makes meaning. It's what helps us know when something is joyous and not.
Absolutely.
And then Brad talks about blissing. He talks about bliss point, this kind of beautiful place where we can live, where we're not in the extremes.
Yeah.
But it is then the extremes that help us find that bliss point.
That's right. And you know, just because you're doing all this work on you doesn't mean that everybody else around you is as well. And so you live in a complex entropic world that is, it's going to create challenges. It's messy. And it's not all there to support you. You know, it's not like the whole world is your cheer squad. So it's about how do you be in that moment as well. And one of my favorite phrases when life's really tough, one of my favorite phrases is, this too will pass. And I guess part of my learning has been that is also true of the highs.
Yeah.
So that when you're in a really great space, this too will pass. There will be dips, there will be down times, and that's absolutely okay. And actually, there's so much learning and growth in those down times. I'm sure I have learned more about myself when things haven't gone well, more so probably than when everything is rosy and everything looks like, you know, there's not a problem in the world. Because then we're tempted to kind of not do the reflection internally.
I mean, when we're afraid of those emotions, when we're afraid of sitting in the dark, we don't give ourselves permission to learn the lessons we need to listen. We turn away and we push against it. And I think quite often it's that resistance and not allowing ourselves to feel those feelings that's part of what creates the disease, the literal disease in our bodies.
And I am absolutely convinced that my medical condition if not entirely, was largely due to disruption and dis-ease, whereby I was well aware something was going on, and I kept negotiating with my body. If I can just keep going a little bit more, if I can just do this next thing, what will happen when, holding on that there would be greater, wider support coming along that wasn't forthcoming. And I really thought with all my skills that I could negotiate with my body and come through that, and my body went, no.
So what's your biggest lesson from this whole experience now?
Life's short. I've had massive value shifts. This is going to sound really harsh, and I don't mean it to, but some things are not worth giving energy to. And so learning to walk away when something doesn't fit, isn't right, doesn't align with you. Otherwise, the risk is you spend all your life over here on something that's not ever going to create your purpose.
And how that takes so much courage. It takes so much courage and faith. And it's such an amazing thing to do.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it has been enormous. I've very definitely taken some decisions to walk away from some things, and to even more overtly walk towards other things, my faith being that bigger thing that I walk towards. If I feel any wavering at all, I just turn my eyes to that light, and that's where I'm heading, regardless of kind of what's happening behind me and what disruption that there is. So that's been an enormous thing for me, to bring me right back into my Christian faith again. Having the courage to walk away, yes, it did definitely take courage, and part of the courage for that was not knowing. So it wasn't like I was making a choice that I totally and utterly understood what all the steps to follow would be, or what the ramifications would be, but absolutely trusting that was right for me on so many levels. And I think for me, it's a really big and, actually, is what it has done is open up all sorts of other avenues and connections that have just been absolutely delightful, not least of which our podcast. So having kind of said my energy is not well invested here, the world hates a vacuum. And I was very adamant that whatever vacuum was created, whatever space was created, good would come of that it wouldn't be filled with nebulous, unimportant things. And yeah, some of the stuff that's coming out of that space and that vacuum is just absolutely delightful. So again, I wouldn't have got there without the dip. So we're back to the light, the dark, the ups, the downs, that you can effectively flatline even at a relatively okay level, but sometimes you kind of got to get into a dip to then come to an even greater high.
Yeah, and I guess it's the age old, I remember when I first started coaching, really wanting to stop people having the dips, almost wanting to help them find the answers before they were ready. And it's taken time to understand that actually, as humans, part of our deal is that we have to experience that low in order to shake ourselves out of it.
Yeah, a beautiful session that I had with an MBIT coach, actually, a lovely lady called Britta. At the end of it, I was doodling on paper to kind of leave myself with, I'm not an artist, but some line drawings. And one of those was the sense that there were on a branch several chrysalises, and that I had come out of my chrysalis, and I could not help those other chrysalises. They have to do it on their own. If I in any way, shape or form helped with that, then the butterfly wouldn't emerge.
Absolutely.
And so having that sense of it is their journey, and whether it's a client, whether it's a colleague, whatever it is, that you can be there to hold the space, you can absolutely give support and encouragement, but they have to do the work for themselves. And I think as a coach, that is just such valuable wisdom and the place to come from in my mind. It's not my place to tell them anything about what they do. It's for them to find their own beautiful wisdom from within.
On their own strength, you finding your own strength, finding the courage to take action, to do whatever it is. You know, we can't, as coaches, that's not our job. It's not. And how beautiful is it every time you get to witness somebody emerging from their chrysalis?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's such a gift.
And it's almost like, you know, you're sat on the branch watching, encouraging, and then saying, welcome to the next level.
Yeah.
You know, kind of embracing them when they do find that space, as they're letting their wings dry, because you don't come out of a chrysalis and immediately fly. You know, there is a bit of learning to live into the body of being a butterfly.
Yeah.
So again, you know, I think coaching, why do I get excited about coaching, is because you can help people at every single stage along that way, whether it's building the chrysalis around you because you need to hunker down and just look after yourself, whether it's within the chrysalis when you're in that low time and you just need to know you're not on your own, or breaking out of it, or drying the wings, or flying. You know, there's just, it's about being there for somebody else in all of those transitions. So you might have to repeat that because you're breaking up a little bit like a Dalek.
Experience of loving your life today. Can you hear me?
I can hear you on and off. Let's try again. Say the question, because your picture's still frozen at the moment, so we've obviously not got a great connection.
Okay, apologies everybody. What's your most profound experience of loving life to date?
Oh, my most profound. I guess for me, big picture, most profound. When I was 15 and I came home from school, and I knew something wasn't right because there was cars in the driveway that don't normally belong there, and Mum was home from work and she's not normally home from work, and I walked in to find some strangers in the living room and my mum told me my dad had died.
Okay.
And that night, laying in my bedroom on my own, I connected with God for the first time ever in my life as a real person, not as a theory or a faith structure, but I prayed to him and accepted him into my life in a way that was a one-off, really. I mean, I've grown and grown in faith over time, but that was the moment at which I really accepted Jesus into my life. And so for me, in terms of loving my life, in one of the darkest moments for me as a 15-year-old, to know that he was there with me, and through that gave me that love for life to carry on, if that makes sense. So it's almost a counterintuitive moment at which I loved life profoundly within a deep dark moment of having lost my dad unexpectedly, just like gone to work for the day and not come home.
Wow. Did you have Did you have that wisdom at the time? Did you have the words to describe that at the time, or is that looking back on that now?
No, I don't think I did. I think in the time it was almost a, how the heck do I get through this? How do I make sense of it? What the heck happens next? Who the heck, do I turn to, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there was very definitely a kind of turning into him as God the Father to hold me, because I was, kind of just lost in that moment.
And was it conscious? Was it instinctive? Can you remember how it felt and where it came from?
Totally and utterly instinctive. Didn't think it through first, just absolutely just laid down and just started to pray. Absolutely conscious. It was a very conscious choice.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. Which kind of goes right back to the highs, the lows, in terms of we are on a roller coaster. It's and the roller coaster is fun because it is a roller coaster.
Yeah. And having that capacity, I can't remember which Brené Brown book it was, but her talking about interviewing people towards the end of their lives, and one of their biggest regrets was them saying how they wished they'd loved more, and that they hadn't, because they thought that they were protecting themselves from pain, but actually what they missed out on was more love. And I think when you allow yourself to feel and not be too afraid of the lows, it actually then increases your capacity for love.
Yeah, and it is two-way, right? Because it is about both giving love and allowing yourself to receive it.
Yeah.
And so many people have closed off part of themselves through hurts and experiences where they almost stop themselves from being loved.
Yeah. Which could easily have been the story for you then.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I guess as humans, we're pretty resilient, aren't we? And stuff happens and we find a way through, as you spoke about last week, in a different context. So, and I guess we do make a choice. At some level, we make a choice whether to allow ourselves to stay and wallow. And believe me, I went through some rough times, through the grief and through what that meant to us as a family. It wasn't like it just made it okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it kind of gave me a groundedness that I wouldn't have had.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. We talked about our values last week, and you said that one of your core values is integrity.
Oh yeah, pick a biggie.
What does that mean to you? What is integrity, and how do you practice and cultivate integrity?
Oh, it's a great question. What does it mean to me? Integrity to me is about being real and not living life behind a mask. And some people have a real problem with that, both in terms of living that way and also in terms of other people living that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I was sharing with you earlier, Facebook is just a classic mask wearing, let's pretend everything's okay in one respect. So mental health issues, huge, in as much as people are pretending life is this, beautiful rosy cottage, and it's not, and they hide behind it. But on so many levels, there's lack of integrity through Facebook. So I have someone who I am not in any reasonable contact with at all. When there is contact, it's unresourceful contact. And yet they chose to comment on a post as if they were best buddies and close to me. And I look at that and it feels icky inside of me. It's not integrity. It's like, for whose benefit are you trying to show that we are connected and in good, close relationship? Because all it does to me is make me want to push you even further away, because there's even less integrity than I was already aware of. So integrity for me is very much about it links heavily with honesty. It's about being who you say you are, doing what you say you'll do. If somebody says to me they will do something, I expect them to do it. Of course, stuff can come up and you can rediscuss when and how and all of that. But I really struggle with people who talk a lot and then don't walk the talk.
Yeah.
And we see that quite a lot. We see it a lot in lots of different scenarios, and it just rubs with me at a very, very deep level. When I then act in integrity, it amazes me that some people struggle with that. It takes me back to what was that old film? You Can't Handle the Truth.
Few Good Men. Yeah.
And women. But yeah. You know, it staggers me that people would rather I lied or pretend than be honest. And yet I know that it gets me into grief. If I call someone out on a behavior, suddenly I'm the enemy, I'm the criminal. And I'm like, actually, that was a real opportunity for you to step in and be a cause for yourself. And I accept that there's ways of doing that. You know, it's done with the intention of growth and development and love. It's not done with the intention of harmfulness. And you can never know how it's necessarily going to be received because they're in their own place and their own chrysalis at that time. But yeah, so I don't know if that answers it or not. It's a long way around. Integrity, walking the talk, honesty, real, not pretending. Yeah. Having the courage to actually say to somebody, actually, I have a bit of an issue with what you just said, rather than pretending everything's fine and then going and talking about it behind their back.
Yeah. 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 It can be quite lonely, can't it? Choosing courage. Now we also, just to finish off, said we would do a quick fire round. That I'm not sure how well I did on the quick fire bit last week, but we're going to have a go. Just a few questions to finish off. So, can we have a book recommendation, please?
Any of Mary O'Malley's. What's in the Way is the Way, for example. But any of Mary O'Malley's books at the moment, one of my favourite authors.
Thank you. If I had a magic wand and you could change one thing in the world, what would that be?
Oh, I'm trying not to go so specific. That would be an issue then to put out. It was Grant's birthday yesterday. And right here, right now, I'd bring him back and go, tell us a bit more before you go.
Yeah.
Explain it to me again.
Yeah.
Let me know that I'm doing what you wanted me to do, that I've heard the instructions right, and give me the instructions we didn't have time to give. And yeah, to have him back for a period of time to kind of just make sure that we're capable of carrying this forward without him around. And I guess that's because it was his birthday yesterday, so I was thinking of him a lot.
Yeah. And then last one, if you had 30 seconds to tell somebody the most important thing, what advice would you give them? What thing would you tell them if you only had 30 seconds?
Go inside and listen to your heart. That's probably only 5 seconds.
It's fine.
So in the other 25 seconds, I might tell them how to do that using mBraining breathing. But yeah, fundamentally, go into your heart and listen to your heart.
Oh, thank you so much, Suzanne. I love talking to you.
It's my pleasure.
It's so wonderful. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation. You'll be able to find it on all sorts of different platforms, various YouTube channels, SoundCloud, Facebook. We're going to do an audio this time as well as the visual, and we'd love to hear from you. what your thoughts are, what this has brought up for you, what resonates, what doesn't. And if you are somebody that thinks you'd like to get involved in this and we haven't spoken to you, then drop us a message. We will be here next with the amazing Sian Hill. Very, very excited to be talking to her. So thank you so much, and we'll speak to you soon.